To kick off today's program, we have Rob Hunter. Now, there's no finer friend to the study of Southern ceramics than Rob Hunter. As many of you probably know, he began his career as an historical archaeologist with a specialty in ceramics. He moved on to becoming a museum curator with a specialty in ceramics. And since 2001, he has been the editor of the definitive publication on American ceramic studies, the journal Ceramics in America, which is published by the Chipstone Foundation each and every year with all the latest in American ceramic studies. We just happen to have a big supply in the MESDA bookstore available for you to purchase today of not only the latest issue hot off the press with a great article on Alexandria, Virginia stoneware, and other relevant articles, but several of the important back issues that include the 2 volumes that were dedicated to the big art and clay project on North Carolina slip decorated earthenware that Rob Hunter co-curated with Luke Beckerdite and Johanna Brown, and that has been an important traveling exhibit that just left its venue at the Huntsville Museum of Art in Alabama and will soon be opening at the North Carolina Museum of History in Raleigh, North Carolina, which will be its final traveling venue before all of that material returns to the various private collectors and the bulk of it comes back here to Winston-Salem, coming back home to Old Salem. But that is an exciting project that also would not have happened were it not for our lead speaker for today's program, Rob Hunter.
It's just so exciting to see everyone here. I want to thank everyone here at MESDA for making this exhibit possible and all their hard work, as well as my colleagues who worked, some of us for the past 30 years, to see this come to fruition. And in many ways, we're just beginning. We okay with the lights? Do you need them any darker than this, or this is it? I guess this is it. Okay. For those of you who know me, I consider stoneware to be the most important study in all of American ceramic history. It's really a democratic substance used by rich and poor alike, and it reflects a myriad of cultural values, economic, social, political, and even spiritual values, which we might touch on those. Now, the fascinating aspect about American stoneware, it was a regional industry with form and decoration reflected very specific social and geographic constraints. Now, I'd like to take the long view on ceramic history. And I'm not kidding. From the very first clay forms produced 30,000 years ago to the recent past. And I've often posed the question as we start this, have we really made any progress in this 30,000 years period of time? Now, mankind has witnessed a number of important discoveries and inventions, and we often take many of these for granted. Now, in the history of mankind, stoneware is a relatively new invention in the history of the world. Now, although earthenware, as I said, has been around 30,000 years, it wasn't until about 1200 AD that the Chinese potters made stoneware, and the technology didn't come to Europe until the 14th century. And it wasn't until the late 17th century that English potters were using it, and it wasn't until 1720 that the stoneware technology came to America. So in the big scheme of things, stoneware is more of a space-age product than it is a Stone Age product. And I'd like to think of it that way, even though these pots have a prehistoric look to them. It really is a space-age technology we're talking about. It's only been around a few hundred years. Now, with the first permanent settlements in America, we had immigrant potters from Spain and England and they were making pots almost as soon as they landed in the 16th and 17th century. Again, these are earthenware pots made here in this country. The colonists had to rely upon imported stonewares from Germany and later England. These stonewares were brown with iron washes and the cobalt decorated salt glazed stonewares of the Westerwald traditions. Now, the domestic making of American stoneware took place at the port of Yorktown for the first time, as I mentioned, 1720. Now, this is a theme I want us to think about, is that potters always operated in an advantageous location in terms of transport of their goods, and Yorktown was well suited for transportation of the pottery products made there. It was a very ambitious undertaking for an American stoneware factory, both technically and politically. Domestic industries were discouraged by the British Crown and somewhat illegal in the early 18th century. And I like to characterize the stoneware factory of William Rogers as really one of the first steps towards American independence that we took. So for a humble product, I really feel it was sort of the first step before it was a revolution well before the battles took place. Now, the story of America's first stoneware factory may have been totally forgotten if it was not for archaeology. During the construction of a water line along Main Street in Yorktown, a layer of earthenware and stoneware fragments were discovered in the 1950s. Subsequent research led to the discovery of the remains of two large kilns. And these are the best preserved kilns of their type in the world here in humble little Yorktown. This is an artist's reconstruction of one of the large kilns. Now, often we have these images of American potters, country potters, sort of working alone in sort of a small cottage industry. Now, that's in contrast to the large Staffordshire industries which fed the world their ceramics. I mean, these are huge industrial complexes. Now, somewhere in between really is the true story of American stoneware production. Archaeology there suggests that the pottery was actually at a fairly large scale, including the remains of this large building here, which a colleague, Carrie Carson, has rendered in this architectural drawing here, sort of the scale of the building. It truly is more than a cottage industry. It really is a small industry taking place. Now, the archaeology produced evidence of over 25 different vessel forms made by William Rogers in Yorktown between 1720 and 1745. Tens of thousands of these objects must have been produced during this time. Now, what's significant about that note is that not a single antique example of his wares have survived to be found. No one has an antique example of this thing. And that's really the story of the first 200 years of American pottery. The products do not survive. Therefore, no one cares to remember about these industries from documents otherwise. It truly is, the study of ceramics is an archaeological venture first and foremost. So there's still hope that someone will turn up one of these intact objects. And just please give me a call and I will send you a check. And even let you fill in the amount. So, but William Rogers, his stoneware production mimicked the very best London forms of the time, and these tavern mugs, which mimic in size and shape and finish the popular tavern mugs of Great Britain. Now, William Rogers also brewed beer, and actually he made his living primarily as a brewer. And actually, the production of stoneware was almost an afterthought, but it was clever because he was able to provide the taverns that he sold his beer to serving vessels for their clientele. And that's a story too. We may hear. The production of pottery may not be the primary business for a lot of these people. It's almost a sideline, and but they're connected reasons. And we may hear more about that today as we hear the other talks. And this is an example of one of the mugs with the stamp mimicking the British excise tax stamp here. Rogers shipped his products from Yorktown to ports in the Caribbean and New England. This truly was larger than a regional industry. Even though in Virginia we literally find Rogers wares on every single archaeological site that dates to the first half of the 18th century, virtually every site. So he really had a wide customer base. Even sherds of these stoneware mugs have been found in early contexts at Mount Vernon. Now, we're skipping up to Pennsylvania now. A little bit later in time, in the mid-1720s, Anthony Duché and his son Andrew and his family began producing stoneware there in their Philadelphia factory. They made both sort of these brown dip wares, but they also made these blue and gray stonewares in imitation of the popular Germanic Westerwald wares of the period. So they were actually making two types of finishes on their stoneware. In the 1730s, Andrew Duché left for points south in search of the secrets of porcelain making in South Carolina and Georgia. Some evidence suggests that he actually was successful in making stoneware products in Savannah, and at the moment we do not have any intact examples of these stoneware vessels. However, an important jar here in the MESDA collection with the initials AD, presumably for Andrew Duché, it may be an extremely important artifact of Duché's southern efforts. But this is another story, and one that Brad Reichenberg has told before, and I will talk more about that later as well, but thanks to Brad for bringing this story to fruition. One point I wanted to make is how do we define the American style? Although most of our early American potters were European immigrants copying existing European prototypes, something distinctly American happens in the process of copying or imitating. Here on the left, we see a Westerwald jug from about 1780, and on the right is the American copy made in New Jersey around 1780. Now, you would think if the potters are virtually the same people who are relocating to this country, why are the decorations not exact? And that is a process which I think we could talk all day about, but I liken it to the parlor game of telling secrets, where you tell somebody a secret at the beginning of the line of people, and by the time it gets to end, it turns into something quite different. But it's that process of imitation we want to keep in mind as well today when we see some of the pots in their antecedents in a little bit. Defining the distribution of American stoneware producers, one simply has to look at the transportation systems in place in the early 19th century. Hence the title of my talk, A River Runs Through It. In the early 19th century, there was an explosion of stoneware production in this country, and they all are located around major port cities or river transport systems. And what all you really have to do is simply follow the navigable waterways. The potters took full advantage of these transport systems in order to distribute their wares to abroad markets. Here we see the stoneware factory highlighted here of the Thompson family in Morgantown, Virginia, subsequently West Virginia, where he was located at the city wharf, where his products could simply be loaded on the riverboats and to all points within the tributaries of the Ohio River. So that's something we're here again today. The location of these potters not always had anything to do with clay or fuel, but transportation of the finished products. The 18th century potters of New Jersey exploited the rich clays there to produce blue and gray stoneware, again in imitation of the Westerwald products in the 1760s and 70s. And this is a very distinctive watch spring decoration attributed to the Morgan family of potters in that area. Here's the chamber pot, an archaeological waster. It has a wonderful 1776 date on it. Here we see the beginning of incised decoration, a fanciful decoration with this wonderful zebra. This probably dates to about 1780. Fortunately, we know quite a bit about the New Jersey traditions through recent archaeological excavations of several kiln sites. And the wasters on these sites, this is a distinctive Westerwald style mug fragments, have helped us identify some existing wares, like this wonderful example owned by the Chipstone Foundation. We are now able to attribute it directly to a New Jersey pottery. Before that, we could only speculate, but since we have fragments now, we're able to identify it specifically. This recently identified mug with the GR badge was sold recently by a major American auction house, attributed as German as Westerwald. But fragments in New Jersey clearly show that it's really an American product, and it's the only intact example of its type known. The stories of the 18th century potting dynasties of the Crowleys and Remy families of Manhattan are very well known. Now, I'm not going to really repeat those here today. Suffice it to say that they're very specific decorative vocabularies of their way they incise their ware had a ripple effect on potting efforts both north and south of Lower Manhattan. North of Manhattan in Albany, several stoneware potters operated in the first decade of the 19th century. Now, Albany is very important to our story today. These potters also made ample use of the Hudson River waterway for transporting their products. But what's interesting about Albany is that they lacked suitable stoneware clay to make their products. So stoneware clays from New Jersey had to be shipped up the river for the pots to be made, which is a considerable effort. But again, it sort of underscores the importance of the riverways for transporting the end product, not necessarily the location of clays to produce the products. The potters working for William Capron incorporated the familiar decorative and size styles of the Remy and Crolius family there. Now, the most famous of all the Albany potters was William Cushman. Paul Cushman. Possibly famous because Cushman marked virtually every piece of ceramic he ever made. In some cases, he took that to an extreme, and in this case, using a roulette wheel, this wonderful jar is signed over a dozen times with his name and date on the piece. So we know a lot about Cushman stoneware, and the reason I would argue primarily because every piece of Cushman stoneware you find is signed, as opposed to James River Valley stoneware, which virtually none of it's signed. So a name goes a long way, and I guess we should remember that somehow. In what we do, we should put our name on everything if we want to be remembered. But stoneware was also being produced in the Boston area in the last part of the 18th century, both in the brown dipped manner, English manner, and the blue and gray Germanic style. These are the very distinctive products of Frederick Carpenter, and many American students associate this kind of brown dip ware to his Boston area operation. We know that some of the New Jersey and New York potters also worked in the Hartford, Connecticut area with this wonderful jug from the 1820s. Now, the reason I know this is wonderful, this just sold for over $400,000 at auction. Which I guess is some sort of testament to the significance of American stoneware in the decorative arts. After William Rogers' operation closed down in the 1745 in Yorktown, it really wasn't until the 1790s that stoneware was again being made in Virginia. Now, with the operation of Henry Piercy and John Swan in Alexandria, a regional supply was once again available to consumers. And these distinctively brown dip wares, similar to Rogers was making in Yorktown and those in the Boston area, are I think some of the most beautiful pots ever made. They just have a real pottery feel, and the abstract quality of it is something else. And as Robert showed, we used these for the cover of our journal this year. Now, although these were clearly utilitarian, they had such a charming aesthetic that it must have meant something to the consumers, I would hope, in some respect. But an interesting transitional piece is this picture here showing a combination of the brown dipped wash on the neck used in conjunction with the painted floral decoration. And later, as we progressed through time in the 19th century, Alexandria potters took their decorative repertoire to new levels, making these almost spectacular floral designs. Now, another potter operated nearby Washington, D.C. also used exuberant floral decoration. Interestingly, this 5-gallon jar included on the other side this highly detailed 44-gun warship. You can see this piece had collapsed a bit in the kiln, but yet it survived. And that's the story we're here again today, is that some of these pieces that are highly decorated, even though they had problems in the kiln, tend to be kept. Stoneware was also being made in Baltimore by the 18 teens. Notable potters included Henry Remy and his immediate family who had come from New York to Baltimore. And this process of migration from region to region, again, is the story of American stoneware. And again, something I want to underscore as we listen to the other papers. Many potters operated in Baltimore and made a wide range of objects. And some of these have direct bearing on the topic today. Now, at this point, I want to emphasize the importance of recognizing specific attributes of stoneware manufacture and decoration. These are the nuts and bolts of what we do. How do we read these pieces in the absence of sign pieces or signatures? When this jar first came to my attention, it says Yorktown, 1781. I couldn't believe such a pot would exist. Number one, there was no potter operating in Yorktown in 1781. And why, again, I just totally blown away. So just a quiz for y'all real quick. You know, where was this made and when was it made? Those are the basic questions we all ask about all pots. And this one you would think it'd be self-explanatory. But what the short answer to this, what we were able to figure out, is that because of the attributes, the open handles, the chain link, the slip decoration on the piece, we were able to test, well, that looks like a Baltimore object, perhaps related to the Morgan operation in Baltimore. But why would a Morgan potter working in Baltimore, we know he worked sometimes between 1820 and 1824, make something that's at Yorktown 1781. What was he trying to commemorate? And then we realized, too, one of the big events in the 1820s, in 1824 specifically, is the Lafayette returned to America to visit. And one of the big stops he made was in Baltimore in 1824, right before he came to Yorktown on his tour. So we assumed everything lined up perfectly to suggest this pot was made by the Morgan family in Baltimore and made specifically for the 1824 visit of Lafayette. So much of what we do as ceramic historians is document the who, the what, and the when, but we really don't spend enough time talking about discussing the why. Now, although the stoneware was a perfect medium for artistic expression by a wide range of potters, it doesn't always get the respect that it should among many material culture professionals. And while we give great attention to these special decorations, those especially loaded with patriotic sentiments, like this picture of Henry Lowndes here, we really don't try to understand the decoration we're seeing other than sort of a face value. Now, I want to submit, I'm going back to my broad time spec, I submit that really is very little difference between us and our ancient ancestors when it comes to aesthetic expressions. During this time, man has developed symbolic languages to communicate and express a wide range of ideas and deeply rooted beliefs and concepts. Many of these are unconscious to us. Understanding these symbols requires a given culture's time and place in history, but it also requires we understand a particular group of people more intimately. Now, the beauty of an image, of course, is that it can be easily translatable between different social or cultural groups, even across time. Translating a written text actually requires a different skill set. But for some reason, cows have been a long, pervasive image in our decorative lexicon, and we see them over and over again to this day as important images. This beautifully produced jar with some sort of fish, possibly a whale, is a product of the Thompson family, again of Morgantown, West Virginia, or Virginia around 1860. It's a highly desirable example for collectors, although the depth of interpretation rarely goes beyond, oh, what a cool fish, or that's a spectacular fish in that. Now, as opposed to a cave painting on a California coast that dates about 1,500 years ago, volumes are written about the symbolic interpretation of this whale on the cave wall. And all I'm suggesting today is that animal and floral imagery or geometric imagery, whether painted yesterday or 10,000 years ago or 30,000 years ago, should be open to a wide range of interpretation that we should try to appreciate more. So when you look at the objects and you hear more about the way the range of decoration on these things, try to look beyond oh, that's a big rooster or this and that. Try to think a little further behind. Now, one object, even though I don't have answers for you, I'm just posing the question. Now, this large deer is on an 8-gallon piece of Morgantown, West Virginia, and it's been always cited, at least I think it's one of the greatest examples of all American decorated stoneware. It really is a masterpiece painting on a stone wall. Now, I'm able to go from this image and step back 30,000 years. To this image here, and I actually sit at my desk all day and sort of do this. And I'm not kidding. I mean, it just blows my mind. I mean, something important is going on, but I'm not quite sure what it is. Now, the human figure is also represented on stoneware across many regional traditions. Again, I missed one. Yeah. So again, what I'm saying, when we look at these James River Valley pots, which are presented to you today, there's incredibly rich symbolic meaning that lies behind their decoration. And and like I said, even though we may not get it right, it's important to try to appreciate those beyond just the face value. Now, the human figure is represented on stoneware across many regional traditions. These are particularly detailed examples from Morgantown. This beautiful composition of 3 women beneath a tree is one of the most beautiful, sort of the people pots. I'm not totally clear on the intent of the decorator, but this always have struck me as being a mourning scene, a common scene during the years of the Civil War when this piece was made. However, in this small jar, which dates the same time period, I've always assumed this referenced the battle of the sexes. Clearly, the woman has the much bigger gun here. So my imagination ran to all sorts of symbolic interpretations for this depiction. But this leads me to another point, is that I want to make, and you'll hear about this today in all the talks, is that the making of pottery and throughout the world, really, and particularly in America, is organized along families or even as clans. Potters are very, very clannish folks, keeping all their secrets of potting within family lines. Outsiders were always kept out unless allowed to enter through marriage. Now, when we look at clan behavior, you see these fellows here are pretty well intent of keeping the outsiders out here. When taking this clan behavior into account, I was able to reevaluate the meaning of the small jar I just showed with the man and the woman. Now, if you look closely, here we have the identical image here with the woman with the larger shotgun and the man with the smaller rifle. So I think I'm wrong about my intent about being the battle of the sexes. It may just be a reflection of everyday life in West Virginia during this time period. I think Roddy Moore could help us confirm this for us. I want to end today with the proposition that aesthetics also extend far beyond decoration. I think the James River Valley potters made some of the most beautiful forms in all of American stoneware traditions. Without question, I think the Duval example here at MESDA has all the grace and fundamental silhouette of the most classic of Greek vases. Brad Reichenbach would tell us more, of course, but in Benjamin Duval's own words, he clearly took pride in the output of his potters when it came to form, using this graceful jug as his advertising signage at the sign of the jug. And lastly, I want to point out how fragile our archaeological resources are. When I first read Brad's article as a young graduate student, I was excited for many, many reasons. One, I lived in Richmond at the time, literally 2 blocks away from the Duval pottery site. And I was just mesmerized by the fact that Brad had been able to identify from a single extant piece so much about ceramic history. And in many ways, my career, I was at a watershed point in my career then, rather to remain a prehistorian or go into historical ceramics. And because of Brad's article, actually, I think that tipped the balance, and I took the turn to take this long career, Brad, and thanks a lot. But truly, I'm not kidding. It really was an exciting article, and it did so much to open my imagination about what historical ceramics can teach us. Now, because I was aware of the site and aware of, there had been archaeological preservation efforts, the site was well known in state registers, this and that. But as an archaeologist, I always know you can't count on anything. So every time I visited Richmond, and anytime I always drove by the Duval site to make sure it was still there. Now, my worst nightmare was realized one cold winter day when I drove by, and the entire block had been stripped for an upcoming grocery store. Now, with the considerable help of Marshall Goodman, there was nothing much we could do at the time. We managed to organize some salvage work, but unfortunately, much of what came out of the dump trucks and out of the landfill. We were literally picking pieces of the kiln from the landfill. Actually, one day we knew where the kiln remains were. They seemed to be in wonderful condition. We came back the next day and they were gone with a 10-foot deep hole there. So we just chased dump trucks. But we were fortunate to collect several thousand fragments, which gave us insights into the scope and diversity of the vessels made at the Duval Pottery. A particular note were a handful of incisures suggesting a fairly accomplished decorative hand at the pottery. And we have yet to see these in extant examples, but we can only hope that we can attribute some wares, maybe misidentified as northern wares, as Richmond products. Richmond is the site of other potteries as well, and you'll hear more about that. This is an image of William and Mary Archaeological, a week-long excavation we took on the David Parr pottery site. There, a waste pile which must contain 20 to 40 tons of fragments is still intact, but at the moment is threatened by development, and we're keeping an eye on that on a weekly basis to see what we can do. And this is an example of just some of the fragments from the Parr testing we did. And the quantity of it, I can't exaggerate. Now, this leads us to our Henrico County, the James River complexes we're going to talk to today. I just want to say this complex has to be the best preserved site complex of its type in all of North America. It has laid fallow pretty much since the late 19th century, and tons of material, including the remains of kilns and waster piles and clay pits, are just literally intact in the woods. The area, of course, has been pot hunted over the years. A lot of people try to scavenge nearly intact pots from these waster piles. And we will continue to encourage state and county officials to act now to preserve this amazing complex and perhaps undertake some further long-term research before it's too late. But today, I want to celebrate what we do know, and I hope it increases awareness of these pots, and hope that we can come back in another 10 years and revisit everything we've learned. So thank you very much.